Use a table of values to sketch a graph of y equals negative 2x plus 1. I'm going to make my table of values over here. We're going to have x and then y, and then I'm also going to have a third column to show my work. Y is negative 2x plus 1. And I need to pick values for x. We could pick any number for x that we want, and we'll be able to find a corresponding value of y. But the way that I've drawn the x and y axes, we have some limitations. If you look at the x-axis, it only goes from negative 12 to positive 12. That's what I've drawn. So we want our x values to be between negative 12 and positive 12 so that the points will actually show up on the grid that I've drawn. The y-axis goes from about negative 8 to positive 8, so we want our y values to be in that range. But we can't guarantee that because we're really picking x values and then figuring out y. So really, if we want to get y values that aren't that big, it's probably good to pick x values that aren't that big. So I'm going to pick 1 and 2 for x. I'm also going to pick 0 and negative 1 and negative 2. Generally, I like to pick at least 2 positive values. I like to plug in 0, and I like to pick at least 2 negative values. That way we can see what's happening to the right and to the left of the y-axis. So let's start with x equals 1. So if we plug in 1 for x, that's going to be negative 2 times 1 plus 1. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. And negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. So we know that y is going to be negative 1. Next, let's plug in x equals 2. That gives us negative 2 times 2 plus 1. Negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. And negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. So when x is 2, y is negative 3. Next, we plug in 0. 0 is my favorite because anything times 0 is 0. So negative 2 times 0 is going to be 0. And we have just 0 plus 1, which is 1. Next, we move on to the negatives. So now negative 2x will be negative 2 times negative 1. And we know that a negative times a negative is a positive. So negative 2 times negative 1 is going to be positive 2. And we have 2 plus 1 equals 3. So when x is negative 1, y is 3. And lastly, we have x equals negative 2. When we substitute that in, we have negative 2 times negative 2 plus 1. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. And 4 plus 1 gives us 5. So when x is negative 2, y is 5. So now we have 5 different points that we can plot on the plane. The first point, x equals 1, y equals negative 1, is the point 1, negative 1. And when we put that on the xy plane, the x-coordinate of 1 means we're moving to the right 1, and the y-coordinate of negative 1 means we're moving down 1. So that point is going to go at 1, comma, negative 1, which is right there. Next, our point is going to be 2, comma, negative 3. To figure out where that goes, since the x-coordinate is 2, we move to the right 2. And since the y-coordinate is negative 3, we move down 3 to negative 3 on the y-axis. And our second point is going to be right there at 2, comma, negative 3. Our third point is 0, comma, 1. So when we're plotting that, because the x-coordinate is 0, we're not going to the left or right at all. We're just staying at 0. And then the y-coordinate is 1, which means we move up 1 on that y-axis. And then that point is going to go right there, 0, comma, 1. The next point is negative 1, 3. When x is negative 1, we saw that y is 3. So to plot that, we go to negative 1 on the x-axis. And then since y is 3, we go up 3 units. We go up to 3 on the y-axis. And that's going to be our next point, negative 1, 3. And then the last point is going to be negative 2, 5. To see where that goes, we go to negative 2 on the x-axis. That's to the left 2. And then 5 on the y-axis. That's going to be up 5. So that fifth point is going to be right there, negative 2, 5. Now these are just 5 points of the graph, but this is a linear equation. We know that the graph is going to be a line, and we can see all the points that we plotted look like they're on the same line. So that gives us a bit of confidence that we have plotted them correctly. And so we want to draw the straight line that connects those points. I would recommend using a ruler, but that's a bit hard with the iPad, so I'm going to have to do it by hand. And we end up with this line, which represents the graph of y equals negative 2x plus 1. It's always a good idea to label the graph with the original equation so that you can see which line that represents. And so this is the graph of y equals negative 2x plus 1.